West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Roger Stone, longtime infamous Republican political operative, dirty trickster, dating all the way back to the Richard Nixon administration. In fact, he likes Richard Nixon so much he's got a tattoo of Nixon on his back. Stone also, somewhat notoriously, is Donald Trump's longtime associate, ally, henchman, and fixer. Which is why, in 2019, Stone was convicted of 7 felony counts stemming from the Russia investigation, including obstruction of the investigation, lying to investigators, and witness tampering. That then only resulted in President Trump commuting his sentence in July 2020, just in time for Stone to help plan the January 6th insurrection. Stone appeared at multiple Stop the Steal events in the days leading up to the attack, and just this evening, he was subpoenaed by the bipartisan House committee investigating the insurrection. According to the subpoena issued to Stone, quote, "You reportedly spoke on January 5th at rallies at the U.S. Supreme Court, held by a group affiliated with the right-wing militia, the Three Percenters and Freedom Plaza. While in Washington, you reportedly used members of the Oath Keepers as personal security guards, several of whom were reportedly involved in the attack on the Capitol. You've stated that you were invited to lead a march to the Capitol from the Ellipse rally on January 6th, but did not end up doing so or going to the Ellipse rally or the Capitol that day. The Ellipse rally, of course, is that rally that took place just before the mob descended upon the Capitol. And it's where Donald Trump spoke and whipped up the crowd and told them, we're all going to march down to the Capitol. In a statement, Stone denied any advanced knowledge of the insurrection or involvement in its planning. He says he has not yet been served a subpoena, but Stone was just one of 5 Trump-adjacent targets of subpoenas today. They also want to hear from Alex Jones, the disgraced right-wing conspiracy theorist who just lost a defamation lawsuit over his allegations that the Sandy Hook shooting was a hoax. He was sued by family members of those who were killed. Jones repeatedly promoted Donald Trump's bogus lie of election fraud leading up to the insurrection, including on the night of January 5th, where he said this.
We have only begun to resist the globalists. We have only begun our fight against their tyranny. They have tried to steal this election in front of everyone. And as I told them 20 years ago, I tell them again, I don't know how this is going to end, but if they want to fight, they better believe they've got one.
Boy, real kind of form and content merger there with some unsettling historical resonances, huh? According to Jones' subpoena, quote, the White House told you on or about January 3rd, 2021, that after the Ellipse rally ended on January 6th, you were to lead a march to the Capitol, where President Trump would meet the group. You did, in fact, march from the Ellipse to the Capitol. The committee has also subpoenaed 2 people who we've not really heard that much about, Dustin Stockton and Jennifer Lawrence. Not that Jennifer Lawrence. A couple who were heavily involved in a number of Stop the Steal rallies and who Politico once called, quote, the Bonnie and Clyde of MAGA world. According to both subpoenas, the couple helped plan the Trump rally at the Ellipse. Stockton's subpoena also says he was in contact with Trump and Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, and that he wanted to warn the White House about the possible danger of the Stop the Steal march to the Capitol. Quote, "You were reportedly concerned about plans by the Stop the Steal movement to organize an unpermitted march that would reach the steps of the Capitol as Congress gathered to certify the election results." In a statement, the couple said they are committed to transparency. Finally, the committee wants to hear from Trump World Associate Taylor Budowich, who currently serves as communications director for the former president. According to his subpoena, he offered an organization $200,000 from an undisclosed source to plan social media and radio advertisements for the Stop the Steal rally at the Ellipse on January 6th. Now, Roger Stone and Alex Jones are notorious trolls, notorious figures. They have built their brands off their obstinance, their willingness to defy what they perceive to be their liberal enemies, even at personal cost. The extent of their cooperation in this investigation truly remains to be seen, especially since Steve Bannon, who is a sort of similar kind of guy, has been criminally indicted for contempt of Congress for refusing to appear before the committee and turn over documents. Now the committee is warning they're going to try to do the same to former Trump Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, who has so far defied the committee's subpoena. But today's subpoenas make clear that a significant number of public figures in Trump's orbit were at the very least aware that something was going to happen after that January 6th rally by Donald Trump. The question is what? Joining me now are two reporters who have been doing stellar reporting on the events surrounding January 6th and the investigation currently underway in the House. Betsy Woodruff Swan of Politico and Luke Broadwater of the New York Times. Betsy, let me start with you on Stone. I may be recalling this incorrectly, but I think "Stop the Steal" was a phrase that Stone was using in the run-up to the 2016 election, sort of prophylactically to discredit an anticipated Hillary Clinton win. And that has carried over, and he was really central to the Stop the Steal drumbeat in 2020 and always around the kind of orbit of Trump. I guess you're not surprised by the subpoena, but how would you characterize his role as we know it so far?
It's a good question. Stone is part of this constellation of far-right media personalities who sort of feed on the notoriety that they experience and are almost indefatigable in terms of any sort of press revealing the actual activity that they've engaged in over the course of their professional lives. Of course, Stone, Alex Jones is in this category. Steve Bannon is in this category. To your point, there are people who are not formally part of Trump's companies or part of his campaigns or the administration that he ran, but that are close enough by association that they can engage in activity that moves the ball forward for Trump without necessarily producing backlash for him by virtue of being part of the administration itself or part of the campaign itself. And that's why the Stop the Steal term is something that fits so seamlessly into what Trump himself would say. It was a term that was helpful for Roger Stone to use, that he and Ali Alexander really promoted and pushed out there as this encapsulation of what was going wrong and what needed to be done. And that was very easy for Trump to adopt because perhaps more than anybody else, Roger Stone is fluent in Trump and he knows how to produce slogans and commentary that fit into his vernacular.
Luke, I was also reminded by these subpoenas. I remember at the time seeing Alex Jones crop up. He's someone that, is sort of, again, in that circle. I had forgotten how present he was, actually, until I read these subpoenas. And I thought that bit about how the subpoena says that he was told by the White House to lead the march, which I didn't. You've been reporting on this so closely. Is that new information? Did we know that already about that allegation, at least as stipulated in the subpoena letter?
Well, the January 6th committee has certainly put a highlighter right across that. It's actually something Alex Jones says on his, whatever you call it, internet show the day after the attack on the Capitol. He's out there, he's claiming Antifa did this, all sorts of wild conspiracy theories. But he says in the course of this long rant that the White House contacted him 3 days before January 6th, told him to lead a march on the Capitol. He said the Secret Service would show him where to go and that Trump would tell the crowd, go to the Capitol and I'll meet you there. Now, Trump, in fact, does tell the crowd to march to the Capitol. He does promise to meet them. He tells them to fight like hell. and then he doesn't show up. But Alex Jones does make the march along with Ali Alexander. And so the committee obviously has been doing a good bit of listening, not only to Steve Bannon's podcast, but Alex Jones's, and picking up on these details that people are saying out in public, but take some unearthing to dig up and sort of piece together where you can sort of put all the puzzle together the way the committee wants to lead to the conclusion of what happened on January 6th.
It is Tuesday, the 23rd of November of 2021, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays, a small scant dash, a mere pinch of hot smoked Hungarian paprika will make all the difference in the world. Okay, got that out of the way. Now, what do we have ahead of us? Boy, the Nazi takeover of America continues apace. They just won't stop, will they? Boy, I'm telling you, if we don't punch the Nazis, they're going to stack us into cordwood. They've already said it. How is it that they can get away with that kind of language, but if we say, hey, stop it, they'll accuse us? And when I mean they, I mean, the authorities. The police, or whoever is policing, they'll say, hey, stop being a bully. We're going to have to incarcerate you because you're inflaming the Nazis. Your mere presence is enough to inflame, and so it is your fault. Well, thank you very much. Speaking of which, I watched the interview on Joy Reid's program yesterday with the father of the Huber kid. And that was tough. Now, my son did not pass in a violent way, but losing a son is no fun. And it was hard watching that dad who talked about not being able to grieve. They haven't been given the time to grieve. And as you could probably surmise if you watched the interview, he was a Trump supporter, the dad. And then his son got killed, and then Trump pretty much blamed his son. Not knowing anything about it, of course. Remember when Obama came to the aid of the Professor Gates, who was arrested while he was going into his own house because apparently black people aren't supposed to be living in that neighborhood, even though he'd been in that neighborhood for 20, 30 years? Who called on him? The neighbor. Oh, I don't know. All black people look alike. I had no idea it was Henry Louis Gates. How was I supposed to know? And remember when Obama opined on what had occurred? And apparently everybody said, you don't know anything that happened. And he did. But even though he had opined on facts, he was pilloried for interjecting himself in what could be a court case. And it did turn out to be one. So presidents have to be a bit careful of how they voice their opinions on crime, shall we say. Richard Nixon was notorious for that. He had made some sort of comment. I don't know. Was it the Manson trial? Reagan did the same thing. And you can't do that. That's intimidating the jury or influencing a jury. Have to be careful. Trump doesn't care about that. He's a mobster. He doesn't care about the law. The law is for little people. So no one took Trump to task for any of his opinions on any kind of court case because as long as it was bashing the liberals, everything is okay. All is fair in love and bashing the liberals. All things are fair in love. Does that mean running down the mother of your child in an SUV, getting put in jail, and then while you're still on probation, drive your SUV through a parade, killing a bunch of little kids and grannies, dancing? Notice how the right wing jumped on that when they found out, oh, a black guy out on parole or out on probation. Oh, it's the liberals. Well, no, I'm sorry. It wasn't the liberals that put him out there. It was an antiquated court system that doesn't take the abuse of women seriously. Oh, he just tried to run down the mother of his children. That's no big deal. I mean, look, the lady probably, enticed him. It's always the woman's fault anyway. What was she doing? What did she do to make him so mad? Or the cop. A cop. Was this in Massachusetts? I'm trying to remember. It just came across my transom because there's all these weird, raping 4 women, 4 counts of rape. And the judge determined that his, quote, victim, because he didn't call her the victim, was not psychologically damaged. What? I hate to tell you this, but, rape itself is psychologically damaging. Who teaches the people these guys? Who teaches these guys this stuff? Yeah, it's guys. So I don't really consider that to be an enlightened judiciary who would let a wife beater go out on the streets and get back into an SUV so he can mow people down while he's in a peak. Those are judges who give wife beaters the benefit of the doubt. Now look at all the wife beaters, child abusers in the Trump administration, for instance. And then look at those that he endorses for elected office. I made a joke yesterday, if you kept every wife beater and child abuser maggot from running for office, the Nazis wouldn't be able to take over America. And they wouldn't. There wouldn't be enough of them left to be able to burrow into the government, the deep state. They always tell you what they're going to do. Also funny, I had a fascist from Brazil telling me that, Lenin was the commies, it was the socialists that came up with all these things that have been attributed to the Nazis, like the big lie. It's like, do they think that I'm just a young kid? I remember this stuff. I didn't learn it. I remember it. So don't tell me. Don't gaslight me. It's going to be scary when we are gone, how history is going to be manipulated. They are just going to turn everything upside down. No such thing as the 19th Amendment. Prove it. Okay, it's right here. Yeah, well, it's not. We say it's not, so therefore it's not. All right. We're already doing it. They're burning books. I still say that any parent who wants to burn a book, and I mean that hyperbole, any parent who wants to get rid of the book from a library or a reading list first has to write a 5-page book report and then a 10-page argument on why the book should be banned. Spelling, grammar, and syntax will be severely enforced. You can't write it properly, you don't get to argue it. Get out of here. It's funny, how people who think that they don't need a medical license to practice medicine, they don't need to have gone to school and get a teaching credential to become a teacher. They know better than the professionals. I hear that all the time. I mean, there's no nothings in my family, believe it or not. Of course, my dad's not a know-nothing. I would consider him to be quite learned. Others do as well. But it is hilarious how even my father will be taken to task by some of the know-nothings who know more than the professional, know more than the expert. In fact, an expert to a know-nothing is a pejorative. You're an expert. And that's how we are. Or that's why we are where we are. I'll get it out. We let the know-nothings tell us that they know everything, and they know nothing. And out of respect or, I don't know, politeness, some sort of etiquette, we're not going to tell them, hey, you're a effing idiot. Shut the F up. Instead of that, we're all, okay, well, I'll take it under advisement. No. You got to punch that Nazi BS right in the face. And you know what I mean. I don't mean physically necessarily. I would never advise anybody to go right up to a Nazi and punch him in the face. I mean, come on. A few body shots and then a left hook works a lot better. You don't just walk up to a Nazi and punch him in the face. Everybody thinks they're going to knock someone out with one punch. It's not going to happen. And in the meme of punching the Nazi, it's not going to take one punch. It is a battle. They are rust. Rust is a caustic element. It deteriorates structure. The Nazis are rust. We need to rub them out every day. Scrape and rub, scrape and rub. I'm telling you, the ship of state collects rust and barnacles, and we have to clean it off. Purge the Nazis from government. I am serious. Nazis should not be allowed to be part of our representative democracy when their stated goal is to destroy democracy. How dare we allow people to elect them into office? They should not even be able to be on the ballot. How many commies were running during McCarthy's era? How many? A lot of them lost their jobs. So why do we allow the Nazis to do everything that we would never allow a commie to do? Because the Nazis are one of us. One of us. Not one of where I come from us. Nope. We punched the Nazis. We kicked Nazi ass. And I'm going to tell you, we kicked commie ass too. Why? Because we are Americans. Representative democracy. Rah, rah, rah. Come on. Talk about heritage. Jeez. Admit your mistakes. Admit that we've been, fairly irresponsible to the people that, we, rolled over. The people we enslaved. The argument, I wasn't there back then when all that happened. Well, you're here now. Why are you tacitly approving of it? Pretending it didn't happen like it's not your fault. It's not my fault. Well, you better start taking some responsibility. We all better. This guy, Darrell Brooks, needs to be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. There should not be any party division on that. The right wing is taking it because, it's a black guy. He's the leader of Black Lives Matter. How racist can you get? As racist as that defense lawyer in the Aubrey trial who talked about his long toenails. Hairy feet and long toenails. What the hell is that about? It's about racism. All they need is one on that jury. All the Nazis want is one person in a group to say, hey, you know what? Maybe the Nazis are right. Let's kill the Jews and their friends. Now, I saw some advice that maybe people shouldn't be putting political bumper stickers and on their cars and, any kind of political statements. People are getting hit and beat up and damaged, vandalism done to their autos. I got to tell you, I mentioned this on social media, I haven't put a political bumper sticker, actually any bumper sticker. I had a Netroots radio bumper sticker on the orange Dodge Dart for a while. But I haven't put a bumper sticker on a car since my was it a 74 Datsun? It was pretty new. I got a Datsun. Remember that? Remember those? Not a Toyota, a Datsun. I got a Datsun. And I had impeachment with honor and Tricky Dick and, just a bunch of political bumper stickers plastered all over the thing. And during the impeach Nixon rally and during the impeach Nixon imbroglio, that car was trashed. I come out one morning, the tires were all slashed, the windshield was bashed in, and I go up, and it looked like they tried to start a fire on the inside of the car. Good thing it didn't explode. Probably didn't explode because those were in the days when I would barely make it to a gas station. Sometimes I wouldn't even make it to the gas station. I'd have to walk and go get a gallon of gas, put it in, and then drive to the gas station to fill up. And actually, I wouldn't fill up. I'd put a couple of dollars in. Those days. So probably there wasn't enough fuel in there to cause it to explode, thankfully. But I learned my lesson. If you're going to put a bullseye on your back, you can't be surprised that someone tried to, plug it. Okay, with a hollow point. So I learned that lesson. Didn't stop me from being an activist. Didn't stop me from the political process. But for survival's sake. Yeah. And it is a bit bothersome when we have the maggots being so gleeful in their bullying with their maggot flags on their big ISIS trucks. Armed to the teeth. They're free to wear their Trump t-shirts. I get bad looks for wearing a mask because my mom caught COVID from these idiots. All right. Neighbor. Shall I click my heels and give you a one-arm salute? Yeah, I don't know. I think maybe I'll be in the camps too. If I live that long. Hey, what's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe? Oh, I don't mean to be so negative, but they really are starting to piss me off, and I've been pissed off for quite a while. Starting off in the Bistro Cafe at the top, yes, the Roger Stone and Alex Jones subpoenas do make it clear there's a lot of people in on the conspiracy, and they knew a lot about what was going to happen. It's just that, what was it that they knew? That's why they're being asked a few questions. On the rest of the menu, the Biden administration is investing $1.5 billion in a healthcare workforce, and we need it. The New York Times urged a judge to restore its constitutionally protected freedom to cover the conservative dirty tricks group, Project Veritas. And Mississippi lost its Supreme Court water fight with Tennessee. Share an aquifer? Well, we'll see how much sharing there is. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where 2 journalists have been released from custody after being arrested while covering police brutality against First Nation pipeline protesters in northern British Columbia. And the upcoming Interpol election that includes authoritarian candidates raises human rights concerns about fair policing. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link, and the chat room, or the chat room, is monitored by the Kelly Lincoln, and thank you, Kelly, for doing so. If you would look across the page to the left at our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you will then hopefully notice the link to our Patreon page. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, it would really help us pay our bills. If you could afford an espresso-type coffee drink, for instance, and if you could afford to send those funds our way once a month, it really does help us pay our bills, which then allows us to fly under the radar and continue this powerhouse of resistance against the hostile takeover of representative democracy by hostile forces arrayed against freedom, liberty, and the American way of life. So thank you for your generosity. We've been doing this for over 10 years, going on 11 now. Wow. 24/7, 365 resistance. We will not allow it to happen, and we thank you for allowing us to fulfill our civic duty, as the founders originally intended so many years ago. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, it is so simple. You just go to @NetrootsRadio. Tom takes care of that. Thanks, Tom. Follow me on Twitter @JusticePutnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime. This is why you should follow me on Twitter, because then I post those show notes and links from Daily Co's onto Twitter. And the show notes and links are very important because they're the show notes and links where the real reportage is. And then I also get it linked up on those other social media platforms, and you know which one I'm talking about. Yes, you do. You can also follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West. And most importantly, would you please pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., etc., etc. Links are on the Daily Co's diary if you feel so inclined to go there. Yes, they are. All right. This first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is out of the Associated Press by Alexandra Jaffe. Vice President Kamala Harris announced yesterday, Monday, that the Biden administration is investing $1.5 billion from the coronavirus aid package to address the healthcare worker shortage in underserved communities. The funding will go to the National Health Service Corps, Nurse Corps, and Substance Use Disorder Treatment and Recovery Programs, all federal programs that offer scholarship and loan repayments for healthcare students and workers if they pledge to work in underserved and high-risk communities. Our nation must invest in a healthcare workforce that looks like America and provide access to equitable health care for all Americans, Harris said. The money, which includes funds from the American Rescue Plan and other sources, will support more than 22,700 providers, marking the largest number of providers enrolled in these programs in history, according to the White House. It comes in response to recommendations laid out earlier this month by the White House's COVID-19 Health Equity Task Force, which issued a report outlining how the administration could address systemic inequality in the healthcare system. Now, what that means is that all those hospitals in rural areas that closed down because they just couldn't make a profit, this will address those communities. That's what they mean by systemic inequality. Do not be afraid of it, my maggot friend. Do not be afraid. The COVID-19 pandemic has both highlighted and exacerbated healthcare disparities for minority and underserved communities. According to an analysis by the Kaiser Family Foundation, over the course of the pandemic, minority Americans have seen higher numbers of cases and higher rates of death than their white counterparts. Oh, if we save black people, that means that more white people will die? That's how they think. Oh, God. They don't think that all boats are going to rise with the water level. They think that all boats are going to rise but theirs, and they're going to sink. God, I hate these people. Rhetorically now, please. COVID-19 did not invent health disparities. Just ask any healthcare professional. And she will tell you health disparities existed long before this virus reached our shores. Health disparities stem from broader systemic inequalities, the vice president said. It's just the latest investment from the $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan passed in March of this year, aimed at addressing health disparities among minority and underserved communities. And that means your community out there in nowhere land, Mr. Maggot. Earlier this month, the White House announced an additional $785 million in federal funding for federal programs aimed at improving diversity in the public health workforce and supporting people with disabilities. During the event, Harris pushed for passage of President Joe Biden's nearly $2 trillion social safety net and climate change package, which would provide funding to temporarily close the Medicaid coverage gap. Oh, God, would they? That would be so great. And expand access to health insurance marketplace subsidies through 2025. Harris said the package would also make a historic investment in maternal health to address the tragedy of black maternal mortality in America. Black women in the U.S. are about 3 times as likely to die from a pregnancy-related cause as others, partly because of racial bias they may experience in getting care and doctors not recognizing risk factors such as high blood pressure. Coster of Reuters brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. The New York Times urged a judge to restore what it called its constitutionally protected freedom to cover the conservative activist group Project Veritas on the eve of a hearing on a rare attempt to block news coverage by major media. Calling Project Veritas a conservative activist group is because they can't call them rat fuckers in a family newspaper. In this reporter's opinion, Project Veritas's claims do not implicate the kind of extraordinary public harms, such as national security, that American courts have suggested might rarely justify a prior restraint, the Times lawyers said in the court filing. The newspaper also accused Project Veritas of trying to silence critical reporting despite First Amendment guarantees, while it pursues a defamation lawsuit against the newspaper. Project Veritas and his lawyers did not immediately respond to requests for comment because no one ever does. Justice Charles Wood of the Westchester County Supreme Court at a Tuesday hearing today, will consider whether to extend or lift his November 18 order blocking the Times from publishing or seeking various documents related to Project Veritas. The group had objected to a November 11th Times article discussing its journalism practices and a Department of Justice probe into its possible role in the theft of a diary from President Joe Biden's daughter, Ashley. Now, of course, that's the group, Project Veritas, the rat effers, not the Times. That article discussed memos by a Project Veritas lawyer that the group said were protected by attorney-client privilege. It wants the Times to destroy the memos and remove them from the November 11 article. You don't have lawyer-client privilege when you committed a crime. Now shut up. The dispute relates to Project Veritas' separate defamation case concerning a September 2020 Times article describing a video the group released alleging voter fraud connected to the campaign of Congressman Ilhan Omar. The Times said it has not faced any prior restraint since the Pentagon Papers in 1971. And that well-settled law lets media publish newsworthy information they obtain independently, even when the subject is suing it for libel. If the rule were otherwise, litigants could readily silence critical reporting by filing meritless lawsuits, the Times said, and I'm sure the Project Veritas lawyer said exactly. The Times also said it was difficult to understand how Project Veritas, which presents itself as an investigative news organization, now advances arguments that would enable litigants to restrain its own work. The case is Project Veritas v. New York Times Company et al., New York Supreme Court, Westchester County, number 63921/2020. Staff at the Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A unanimous Supreme Court yesterday, Monday, rejected a claim that the Memphis, Tennessee area has been taking water that belongs to Mississippi from an underground aquifer that sits beneath parts of both states. The High Court's first decision of the term came in a case argued in October, deflating expectations that the justices would resolve the issue of whether Texas' ban on most abortions would be challenged in federal court. Two cases on the Texas issue were argued November 1st under an accelerated process that the court has previously used only rarely and in some of its most notable decisions, including the Bush v. Gore case that settled the 2000 presidential election. Settled. Gave it to Bush. But those cases remain unsettled. Instead, Chief Justice John Roberts wrote for the court in an interstate water dispute that reaches back to 2005. We're not going to talk about these other cases that everybody wants to know about. We're going to talk about water. The Supreme Court has long embraced the concept of a fair share in state fights over rivers and streams, a legal doctrine known as equitable apportionment. Mississippi, though, contends that it has sovereign ownership of all groundwater beneath its surface, so equitable apportionment ought not to apply. We see things differently, Roberts wrote. Although the water source at issue in this case is water from hundreds of feet below the surface, Roberts wrote, we see no basis for a different result. Tennessee Attorney General Herbert H. Slattery III praised the decision. We now have some finality. It's a clear victory for Tennessee on all issues and for all states who share underground water resources. Well, indeed. Let us now go to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
For an expectant mother,
Taking care of her developing baby means taking good care of herself. One way she can do this is by ensuring she gets vaccinated. If a woman is or might be pregnant during flu season, it's especially important to get her annual flu shot, preferably before the end of October. In addition, women should be vaccinated against whooping cough during the 3rd trimester of each pregnancy. Failure to get vaccinated places both mother and baby at increased risk for serious complications of these infections, including hospitalization and even death. If you're pregnant or planning to get pregnant, ask your healthcare provider when you should get your vaccines. Thank you for joining us on A Minute of Health with CDC. For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
He's running first, second, third. He stopped between third and home. What the heck?
Ooh, that's not the time to stop. And now's not the time to stop wearing a mask. Vaccines are a game changer. But the game's not over. Mask up until you're vaccinated. Let's finish strong. For more information, please visit cdc.gov/masks. A message by CDC and the Ad Council.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage. Because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
When a federal employee illegally and flagrantly uses their federal job for political campaigning, there are serious consequences, right?
I'm Baratunde Thurston from The Onion, and also, mother. You're listening to the Civil Liberties Minute with ACLU attorney Bill Newman.
The Hatch Act, which has been the law since the late 1930s, prohibits federal employees from using their federal position for political campaigning. That law has been in the news due to a recently released report by the Office of Special Counsel, a report that documents myriad violations of the Hatch Act by senior advisors to President Donald Trump, including Jared Kushner and Stephen Miller and Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, among others. Here's the rub. For senior political appointees, the Office of Special Counsel can only recommend discipline. There's no fine. And the only person who can impose a punishment is the president. And the person who violated the law can't be fired from a position they no longer hold. So the impact on these Trump appointees will be nothing. The Protect Our Democracy Act going forward would put some teeth into this law, but that legislation is languishing in Congress. The scariest part? These Hatch Act violations are yet another example of how those in power are using their power, including gerrymandering and voter suppression and campaign violations, to maintain that power. It's time to batten down the hatches.
The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1887. That was the day of the Thibodeau Massacre in Louisiana, just southwest of New Orleans. Thousands of African-American sugarcane workers had gone out on strike. Before the Civil War, sugarcane, like other southern crops, had been harvested by enslaved labor. After the war, planters put laws and practices into place to control and repress the newly freed labor force. By the late 1880s, one of those practices was paying sugarcane workers in scrip. Instead of actual money, workers received scrip only redeemable at the planters' stores. This let planters set the prices for goods and keep their workers in a lifetime of debt. The Knights of Labor began to organize the Bayou sugar workers through their local assembly, 8404. The union presented the Louisiana Sugar Producers Association, which represented 200 of the largest planters, with a list of demands. The list included the end of scrip payments and a small wage increase. The planters refused. The union called a strike to begin on November 1st during a key time in the sugar harvest. Outraged planters brought in scabs to replace the strikers and militia troops to protect the scabs. They evicted the strikers from their plantation homes. Many evicted black workers made their way to the black section of Thibodaux. White armed men began to picket around the black neighborhood. 2 of these white picketers were fired on by an unknown person. In retaliation, for more than 2 hours, the vigilantes rained gunfire on black strikers and their families. At least 30 black strikers, and possibly many more, were gunned down. And in the end, the strike was crushed. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 38 degrees Fahrenheit. We've had quite a bit of rain overnight, though it is not raining currently. Cloudy skies early, followed by partial clearing later on. Winds will be light and variable. We currently are under foggy conditions, I should add. And a few clouds overnight with lows near freezing, winds light and variable. And partly cloudy tomorrow with highs around 50. Oh, we're going to have a high around 50 today and a high around 50 tomorrow. And winds will remain light and variable. And it looks like we might not get any rain until about Monday or Tuesday. We'll see how that goes. Confirmed cases of coronavirus in Jackson County in the southern part of Oregon will be updated later today. We are now standing at 245,055 confirmed cases, and our deceased are now officially at 347. And as I mentioned, the weekend totals will be updated after showtime. Pollen is rated as none right outside the window in Rogue River proper. The air quality index for the region is good at 26 parts per million, and that daytime UV index is low at level 1. Barometric pressure is falling at 30.2 inches. Visibility is down to a half mile. And relative humidity is at 100%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 48 degrees and sunny. Paris is 47 and sunny. Rome is 61 degrees and partly cloudy. Kyiv is 32 and cloudy. Kabul is 46 and fair. Hong Kong is 58 and mostly cloudy. Tokyo is 50 degrees and clear. Sydney, Australia is 65 and cloudy. San Francisco, California is 51 degrees and partly cloudy. And New York is 38 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Associated Press staff brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. A photojournalist and a documentary filmmaker have been released by a Canadian judge 3 days after being arrested while covering police enforcement of an injunction against pipeline protest in northern British Columbia. Amber Bracken, who had been on assignment for a BC-based outlet The Narwhal, and documentarian Michael Toledano were released on the condition that they appear in court in February. My arrest and incarceration were punitive and a blatant attempt to repress images of police violence against Indigenous people in Canada, Toledano wrote. I have no doubt that my arrest was targeted. One officer who I encountered many times on the Wet'suwet'en territory gloated about the arrest. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police said in a statement that 2 people who later identified themselves as independent journalists were arrested after refusing to leave building-like structures near a drilling site for the natural gas pipeline, which is under construction. The arrests came after members of the Gidimit and Clan, one of the 5 in the Wet'suwet'en Nation, set up blockades along a Forest Service road on November 14th, and police said the road was cleared last Thursday.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Barbara Cirque of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Human rights groups and Western lawmakers are warning that Interpol's powerful network of global police officers could end up under the sway of authoritarian governments as the World Police Agency meets in Istanbul this week to elect new leadership. Representatives of countries like China and the United Arab Emirates are bidding for top posts in the France-based policing body when its General Assembly convenes in Turkey on Tuesday. Interpol says it refuses to be used for political ends. Critics contend that if these candidates win, instead of hunting down drug smugglers, human traffickers, war crimes suspects, and alleged extremists, their countries would use Interpol's global reach to apprehend exiled dissidents and even political opponents at home. 2 candidates have drawn special criticism. Major General Ahmad Nasser al-Raisi, Inspector General at the UAE's Interior Ministry, who is seeking to be elected Interpol's president for a 4-year term, and Hu Binchen, an official at China's Ministry of Public Security, expected to be up for a vacant spot in Interpol's executive committee. A vote is expected next Thursday. Interpol's president and executive committee set policy and direction. They also supervise the body's secretary general, who handles the day-to-day operations in its public face, and that post is currently filled by German official Jürgen Stock. Al-Raisi is accused of torture and has criminal complaints against him in 5 countries, including France, where Interpol has its headquarters, and in Turkey, where the election is taking place. And Yu is backed by China's government, which is suspected to have used the global police agency to hunt down exiled dissidents and of disappearing its citizens. Indeed. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up tomorrow for Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goer. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. De novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.